I can't remember when I met Greg Ubert. It's been a long time ago. I can't remember. But what I do remember, as long ago as it was, it stuck with me. This is a guy who's determined and who's different. Later, I went to the website, Crimson Cup website, read the story. Who at 23, who has a really, really great job in high tech, asks himself what he wants in life, and he answers to himself an engaging work life, a fun environment, and a culture of giving. Somehow that led him into the coffee business. He'll explain how that transition went, but you know him as the owner of Crimson Cup. Along the way, he's written a book called 7 Steps for Success. It's in its second publishing, and from what I can read in the summary, it's one of those that I'm going to go get. Here's a quote from the website, the Crimson Cup story. And truly, everyone who works at Crimson Cup is energized by their customer successes. They believe they can improve the world and others with their philosophy of LYFE, leave you feeling energized, and LOVE, leave others very energized. It's just the Crimson Cup way. So here's Greg to share his story and especially what's it like to manage a company during COVID. One quick survey for Greg, just for Greg's purpose. For all of those of you in here who are coffee drinkers, please just remain seated. Okay, Greg, there you go.
Virtual, in person, really different times, isn't it? But thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. It's cool to be here. I love Rotary. I am a Rotarian, I guess, still. That is because way back when in the 90s, a neighbor of ours growing up, Ken Galloway, some of you may know him. He said, hey, you want to get into Rotary? Because I was interested in giving back to the community, because at that time I was working so much on my business. My plate wasn't full enough. I needed to participate in Rotary. So it got me involved in that, community service. I was at Downtown Rotary for I don't know how many years, and then went on to start Clintonville Rotary. So that was probably in the 2000s, I'm guessing, something like that. I'm terrible with numbers now, but so that was great. And then that was when we were really getting into our farming community. So part of what we do is work with our farmers across the world, and I derive great joy from that, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But thank you for having me. That's awesome to be here, of people of like mind. So I'll tell you my story. Some of you know my story, some of it, all of it, maybe none of it, I don't know. So we'll start from the beginning and kind of tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up here in Worthington. So I graduated Thomas Worthington in 1985, and then had a choice to make. I played football and baseball, so I could go to Northwestern and play baseball, or Harvard and play football and baseball. I chose Harvard, so I played football and baseball there. And at the end of that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do still. So was it go to finance like in New York, or go some other place? I chose the high-tech industry, computer software, and I said, you know what, I want to get back to the Midwest. So I was in Chicago. So I was in Chicago for a couple years. I found out I couldn't fall in love with computer software and decided to move back to Columbus for numerous reasons. One, I thought Columbus could become a really great city. Because back then, when I told people I was moving back to Columbus, friends from Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, et cetera, they're like, why? Why would you ever do such? Now, how many lights does Columbus have, type of thing? They just weren't familiar with Columbus and didn't think that it would become what I thought back then and what it is today. I would say it's grown tremendously, so much to offer here in Columbus. So that has come true. The other piece was, I had great coffee, And that was partly because of my dad kind of sharing, hey, here's what you want to, here, try this coffee. And I said, no, I don't like coffee, Dad. Well, try this coffee. I don't like coffee. Try this coffee. Okay, I'll try it. So I tried it, and I'm like, man, this is really good. I'm just not used to having great coffee. Back then was just, as you all know, probably wasn't around. So it wasn't around much, wasn't easy to find like it is today, but I thought it would be. I thought people would be enjoying coffee, not just to wake up or stay up, but also for the taste. And so that's the other thing that drew me to Columbus. And so in 1991, I moved back to Columbus, and thankfully I have a good relationship with my parents. Moved into the house and just started Crimson Cup. So started roasting coffee, specialty coffee, high-grade coffee, which we still do today. And really, back then, it was, I had to teach. What I realized was I could make the product, I knew how to get the product, knew how to roast the product, but really, out there in the community, it's not a whole lot of people knew about great coffee. So my whole part in the 90s, because now I'm old enough I can separate it into decades. So in the 90s, what I had to learn was specialty coffee, but not only had to learn it, I had to teach it, because people just didn't know what it was. I'd go into places, whether it's offices, restaurants, you name it, big office buildings, and say, hey, here's, I'm coffee, I'm Greg with Crimson Cup, here, would you like to buy my coffee? And inevitably get to, okay, how much is your box of coffee? I said, well, I don't have a box. They actually come in whole beans. And just people didn't know that. They didn't know freshness was important. They just didn't know a lot of things. So I knew I had to teach and train a lot about coffee. So, which led me to the first decade was really about teaching and training. So what I learned was I had to teach and train. Coffee houses are still a huge market segment. So the majority of our wholesale business is supplying coffee houses throughout the United States. We supply over a few hundred throughout 40 states. What I realized then, too, was that these independent coffee house owners needed some assistance. So is everybody familiar with how many businesses fail within the first 5 years or 3 years? That's a stat that's readily available. I don't know, 50% fail within the first year, 50% after that, et cetera, et cetera. And I realized for us, since we are supplying coffee houses throughout the country, that's not a good business model. To have 50% of your customers fail in the first year, second year, third, whatever. Not a good business model. So what I want to do is teach and train them, because I traveled the country in the 90s and realized, you know what, there are methods to the madness on why people succeed and why people fail. And we need to teach those because we need a strong relationship chain. So that's what got me to write the book. It's in its soon-to-be third edition. And so it's still available, still has all the principles that's needed and necessary. So teaching and training has become a huge, huge part of our business. We also have a franchise in Bangladesh. So maybe later you can ask me why Bangladesh, because that's in everybody's top 10, right? You guys want to go there? Everybody's list of top 10? Maybe not. But nonetheless, we have a franchise in Bangladesh that has 5 stores right now. So if you go to Bangladesh, there are no rules there, no regulations like we have here. I was traveling with our partners there down the street, and they're going to show me their new store, which I hadn't seen, and there's this huge Times Square sign with Crimson Cup on. I'm like, how did you get that? That is cool. And again, no regulation. Somehow they figured it out, right? So other parts of our business are like college and universities, like we supply Ohio State, Otterbein, other ones. So large, small, doesn't really make a difference. Businesses we supply like Nationwide, Cardinal Health, Chase, those types of things. We supply healthcare like Cleveland Clinic or Riverside, Nationwide Children's. That's the wholesale part of our business. So that's the majority of Crimson Cup's business is wholesale. And we do the same thing with them because they need to be taught and trained on how to make great coffee. So we carry the 7 steps over to all our market segments on the wholesale piece. So that was really the first decade. Second decade, was more about our farmers. Because on one side, what we call a relationship chain, because it's much more than just a transaction, that's how we view business. So we wanted to help our customers on one side, and then I realized, hey, you know what? The farmers are making this product, and they're working really hard. So I need to get there and spend a lot of time with them. And so we have. So now we have relationships in Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Honduras, Colombia, Peru, Sumatra, New Guinea, So it's really cool that we're working with all these, because most of them are impoverished communities. So that's when I got into really how can we help them succeed. And it's amazing to me that most of these farmers don't know how to make great product. That was a huge realization for me. Like, why don't they know how to make better product? And so we just decided to teach them. Why not? Because what we are offering to them is, if you make a better product and you invest it, basically what we're telling them is you need to invest in your farm. Now, telling an impoverished or poor person to do that takes some work. But we want to do that because we realize if they have an investment in their community, which is what we want, the chances are it's going to be successful. No different than our offering for independent coffee house owners. We still sell to this day about 400 books a year, 400 7 Steps book. We only work with 5% of them. Because that book was actually meant to weed out the ones who may not be successful. Not because we're hard, but because we want people to succeed. And same thing on the farmer end. So our offering to farmers may seem simple, and it's really not, because I've been in communities that don't want to do what we want to do. And that's okay. That is perfectly 100% okay. We're never into forcing somebody or a community to do what it is that they don't want it to do. Our offering is really simple. So if you do this, if you make better coffee, we're going to pay you more for it. And most of them have never heard that before. Anyway, so what we've done, I'll just point out one community in Alopa, Guatemala. We've took their coffee because there is a point scale on coffee. I know people think it's objective, but just like steaks and stuff like that, there is a method to the madness of points called a point system. So I'll get this out of the way too. Everybody says, what's Starbucks? What is Starbucks? Well, they're about 79, 80 points, and ours is specialty coffee, so we don't bring anything less than 84.5. So just from an objective standpoint, how coffee's graded, specialty coffee is really more in that 84 and higher category. All right, so Alopa. So with Alopa, we took them from 83 to 84.5. Which is huge because it got them into specialty coffee. We are buying from them now 5 containers of coffee, which is about 200,000 pounds a year. Which means to them, they call us the amigo coffee. Because if they go off and don't buy from us, they're going to get about 50 cents less per pound. That's a huge amount of money for a farming community. It's big. So if you ever want to go with me to Alopa, I'm treated pretty well down there. So it's a lot of fun to go down. Seriously, I love traveling. I miss traveling because during COVID, pre-COVID, I was down in Honduras. Took some customers with me. We were building a house for a coffee picker and his family. And then went to Guatemala with some other relationships. So it's just a ball. It's just a lot of fun to be able to do. I don't do all our traveling. I have a few people do our traveling across. That's why we have do some fun stuff. Like this guy here, Mario, he's in Guatemala too, totally separate from Alopa, but he made up a coffee called Finca El Cadejo. Does anybody know what Cadejo is? Okay. So in Central America, they have this mythical dog that walks you home if you've had too much to drink. El Cadejo. So we do fun stuff. We work with a lot of brewers around here too. And this one happens to be a Brothers Drake meadery, if anybody's had mead. But you see the dog on there, Finca El Cadejo. So we put coffee in this mead, if you like that. So yeah, working with our farmers is huge. We love doing it and expanding. So growth now means to me impact. So the more we grow, the more we can impact, because we know we can impact farmers across the world. All right, so third decade. I guess I was looking at, okay, why is everybody always asking us, how's your coffee? What am I going to say? It's terrible. I've never met any coffee roaster around the world that said their coffee's bad. They all say it's great. So I'm like, okay, how can we separate ourselves from everybody saying that it's great? So the third decade was really concentrating on awards. Because in the coffee industry, probably like most, there's a lot of awards going out, and how do you get to all these awards, blah, 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 blah. And which is why I brought my little third thing here. I bet you nobody knew this was around. This, the Gold Bean Award. Can you believe it? This, so anybody who wants a selfie with this, you can do it. Yeah, I'll let you. But this is kind of like the national championship, the World Cup, whatever if you're a sports person, whatever that is, we won it in 2019 in North America. So this is the largest coffee competition in the world. And we won it. Pretty cool. And it had nothing to do with me, by the way. So I have great people doing this. So anyway, so it's pretty cool. What the award was for was the best tasting coffee, the cumulative score, the best tasting coffee with milk, and then best tasting espresso. So that's what that award's for, Not bad. And, it's a continual, what I love about, it's a continual learning experience. I was on the phone with virtual with our, what we call our professor. So our professor, he knows everything about coffee. That's why we have an innovation lab down here. We have offices, two on Bethel Road. One is we're production roasting, shipping, receiving. We go everything, all our green coffee or unroasted coffee goes right into Columbus, right on 1925 Alum Creek. Our innovation lab is on 700 Alum Creek, so that's where my offices is. And where I was speaking to our professor, and he was just telling me some really cool stuff that he's working on. So he's talking about the fermentation of coffee and how it is that we can use different things in there. We can ferment coffee to make it actually taste better. It gets in much more detail than I care to share, and I don't even know. But anyway, the point is that we're working with our farmers so that they can take that coffee, and we hope maybe take it from an 84.5 to an 87.5, just by some of the different ways we can show them how to do their coffee. So that's really cool, and it's just something that it's just awesome to be able to have people that are excited, because this gentleman is certainly very excited about coffee and what it can do and all these types of things. So our innovation lab, we built that 7 years ago. So at the time, it was one of 22 in the country. And what that means is we have the facility set up to do what it is that we need to do with coffee and stuff like that. And we have this gentleman who can train at the highest levels of coffee, the highest you can think of in the world. We can train that. And we've had people farmers come up from Peru. We've gone and certified facilities, so we've certified growing regions in like Ethiopia, which has never been done before, and we did it because we want our farmers to taste exactly what we're tasting here, because if they can do that, then they can understand what we need better. So imagine that, right? You never met your customer before. How about that one, right? That just blew me away. So that's why we have our farmers come up to Columbus. I mean, why not, right? We haven't gotten people from Africa to come over yet, but we probably will. The Ethiopian coffee, the farmer that we get it there, we won the Good Food Award. So that was for the That's out of San Francisco, but it's a U.S. award. It's for the best tasting coffee and most responsibly sourced. So cool stuff all the way around, fun, enjoyable. 30 years, hard to believe. 30-year anniversary was May 1 this year.
Tell us about
COVID.
all the joys you've been experiencing, right?
COVID was interesting because I was in Aruba. So we were deciding whether or not to go to spring break. And so my family decided to go down there and heard everything. And does anybody remember the Twilight Zone? It's one of my favorites, right? So being in Aruba, people wanted to get back home. We got down there on a Saturday, and I think they shut down the country. You couldn't come in unless you were Aruban, like on Sunday. And so then people just started leaving. It was a ghost town. So, if anybody's seen the Rod Serling one where guys walked around with nobody, that's what it almost felt like. It was just weird. But anyway, coming back and then realizing that I didn't have 2019 sales, I had like 1995 sales, right? Because everybody just shut down. So that was really kind of crazy, Like, man, I don't think I could do this over again. So what happened for us was it just kept on. Some industries are still closed. It's really crazy. So, some large offices that we have are open. And it's like, it's not even existing. And then other businesses they're in a hybrid of like maybe 5% of the people coming in. So what we call our business and industry is still lagging behind, very much so. Our hospitals are kind of, sort of a little bit back, maybe 50%. So from a business perspective, coffee houses, guess what happened to coffee houses? Went up. So we have the one in Clintonville, our Crimson Cup owned and operated coffee houses. We have one in Clintonville. UA doesn't have a drive-through. And I knew that going in, so I can only blame myself. But so what happened is customers were feeling terrible, and I just said, shut it down in, April. So we shut down Upper Arlington in April, all of April. And but I knew we couldn't reopen again because that would have been disaster. Customers were still feeling terrible, and so were my people too. My people were not feeling good about it, and that's why we closed it. So I went to, I don't know if you know this fine gentleman at UA, but Steve Shoney. He was down at the city, economic developer, then he moved up Arlington. So I called Steve. His son and my son are good friends. I don't think that helped at all. But anyway, so I called him, and I said, Steve, we got to do something different. And he goes, well, since I have imperial powers now, we can do whatever you want. I said, cool. Well, how about putting our coffee drive right in the middle of the parking lot? Can we do that? He goes, I think we can. Let me have my people come over. So we worked that out, and believe it or not, that probably saved Crimson Cup UA because people were comfortable with the drive-through. So innovation helps where necessary. At Talmadge, we have a store in Talmadge. That's Akron, and that did really well. Crimson over at Easton. Has anybody been to Crimson at Easton? Yeah, cool. What do you have?
Just a cup of coffee.
Cup of coffee. You had a great cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Because over there is our innovation. Over there is our 90-point coffees and higher. That's what we have over there, and we create all the drinks there ourselves. So every ingredient, we know where it came from. So if you have a chance at Easton, it's pretty cool. It's different than our Crimson Cups for sure. Yeah.
I had two questions. First, thanks for sharing your story with us. That's fascinating. You're a private company, I presume.
Yes.
Can you share with us how much coffee you sell a year, or is that a secret, roughly?
Let's see. Okay, so right now we're at about 2 million pounds.
And my second question was, when you were starting out, how did you overcome the fact that your coffee was probably more expensive than what people were used to paying for? Probably still is in some circles. But how did you overcome that price, the price point that you had to set for your product?
You know, back in the 90s, there was two problems. All right, so the problem was most places were using 1.1 ounces of coffee or 1.25 for 64 ounces of water. Okay? The specialty coffee way is 3.75 ounces of coffee for 64 ounces of water. So I had two problems. One is the price is higher. Two, I'm asking them to triple what it is that they're using, right? It wasn't an easy sell. However, you know, all I wanted to do is just find people to listen to me and people to taste it. That's what my goal was. Now, I knew that I couldn't go 3.75 because that would blow people out of the water. Nowadays, people are used to it, but back then they weren't, right? So what I had to do was say, all right, here's what we'll do. Let's start at 1.5 ounces because it should be more, but let's start at 1.5. So I got them to 1.5 and then just kind of gradually took them up the ladder because I knew if I could do that and they wanted to do that is a winner because, you know, you can't go back. Once you have good coffee and stuff like that, you're not going back to 1.1 ounces or 1.25. You're just not going to do it. So. Yeah.
Greg, I have a question for you from Millie, who is watching on Zoom. Are you more interested in retail or wholesale? Oh, Millie also said, Andy, you look great. Thanks, Millie. Are you more interested in retail or wholesale? And if retail, are you looking to have more retail stores?
Great question. Hi, Millie. The answer is I'm outfitting our team now so I can do a lot more retail because I think we have a special story to tell. From the retail standpoint, the best way to reach consumers is through retail. So right now, we're going to open up a store in Westchester, that's Cincinnati, and we're going to open up as many as we can find that are good locations throughout Ohio. And so that's where I'm going to be focusing the majority of my time on growing the retail. Now, wholesale is still, it just continues to grow, so that's a positive thing. We have some good people there. So we'll continue to grow wholesale, but I think retail will be, well, is a major focus of mine, for sure. Yeah.
Given the state of cargo, international cargo, how big a challenge today is inbound logistics, Greg?
It's a challenge, no question about it. I mean, it's, and everybody's familiar, I think. If you go to restaurants or places like that, you see the lack of labor, so that's another COVID challenge. Of course, particularly in our industry, food service, restaurants, it's really not good, right? So that's a problem. Now it takes us about, it used to take, you know, we could call up where we store coffee, like in New Jersey, New York. We could get it within 3 days. Now it's more like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So it's extended the supply chain quite a bit. So what we've done, so for instance, coffee equipment. The stuff that we get takes 4 months now to get. It used to be a week, because they have the chip. So what we did was, thankfully, we loaded up, we bought a whole bunch of coffee equipment that we knew we were going to need, or that could have been a real challenge for us growing, right? Because coffee houses couldn't open. So we had to do that. So it is causing a whole bunch of challenges. Thankfully, we're in a decent financial shape, so we can go out and do the things that we need to do, make purchases, et cetera, have the relationships on the coffee end, which helps during times like this, because, oh, by the way, there's a double frost this year in Brazil, so you might have heard about it. I mean, everything's going up, right? So it's a very tough, difficult environment. Yeah. Jackie?
Speaking of equipment, can you recommend a retail coffee maker that brews your coffee the best, and what brand of your coffee would you combine with that coffee maker?
Yeah, I think, so the second part of that question. So really, coffee is... Oh, okay. What coffee brewer would we recommend for home use? And then what coffee would we recommend for that particular brewer? Second part. So the second part is coffee. So everyone may have their more popular types of coffee that they like or they think is good, right? You know, that's from a subjective standpoint. So somebody might like a dark roast more than a light roast, or like a medium roast more than a dark roast, et cetera, et cetera. So that comes down to your own particular, what it is that you like, right? I think I will get that answer to you, and anybody who wants it, I do have some information, and it does change, but I can get you that information. Maybe I can put it on an email or something like that. So, hey, go get these. You know, here's the 3 brewers that we recommend today for home if you'd like, because there's all sorts of different ways to brew coffee at home. I made my parents a pour-over. Everybody's seen a pour-over? So I made them a pour-over with Armando's blend, which is our most popular blend. That was made back in 1992. So I made them a pour-over, and they always have the drip coffee, and they like that, but they love this. So I gave a cup to 2 cups, one for my dad, one for my mom. He goes, well, let me go. I got to go back to Joyce and see see what she thinks of it. And he came back. He goes, "What? That's great." I said, "What? How can I make that?" And I said, "Well, it's pretty simple. Here's a kettle, and you heat up the water, and you pour it over, and whatever." He's not doing that today, by the way. So he loved it, but then I don't know, too much work. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, that's what he's doing. Yeah.
You referred to the farmers a lot.
Yeah.
Are those a combination of large operations and small family? And how are they today, even regardless of COVID, just the exodus of people from Guatemala and others? So how's that farm running today? And is it a family farm or is it a big commercial operation?
Well, there's a lot in there. I think it depends. So it depends on where you are. So in Brazil, they're typically large collectives because the terrain is a little more flat. So they grow their coffee a little bit different than other places that we go to. So, we go up, high into the mountains is really where we go, and that's harder to farm, but it's where the better coffee is. It's very different from all over. So some will be like the place in Guatemala that I spoke about, and even in Honduras. They are a loose leaf federation, is what they are, of different farmers, and they come together and they can make product better. That's the theory, that's what's working there. In other places like Sumatra, they're all over the place. So it's hard to get, they don't have, we have not found the collective over there because they're so spread out. And their harvesting is much more than just once a year, so they'll harvest year-round, so it just makes it more difficult to do. Now, with what's going on, across the border, et cetera, I think that I've met numerous farmers that came to the U.S. That's a whole nother story, because I found out how they get in and all that. You don't want to know. So they came up, and then they worked here, and then sent money back home. Right? So, but they went back because for anybody, think about it, if hey, I'm leaving family, I'm going to be gone for 3 years, I got to go here to make money, how would that work? It doesn't work very well. So they realize that there's damages to the family when they do leave because they're here for an extended period of time. Anyway.
Greg, that was actually a question Millie had kind of along those lines. Do you see like a change in your supply chain with the farmers as far as like the current influx of immigrants coming to the U.S.?
We're not seeing or hearing anything about that in our farming communities. And I don't know, they haven't told us like, hey, this is really important, but all we can do is participate and hopefully create more work down there. So, and this is kind of interesting. When I was in Honduras, I don't know, when it was, 10 years ago or so. I was at the U.S. Embassy, and the assistant, director, what do they call them? Do you know, Rick? What do they call the ambassador, assistant ambassador? Was there, and they wanted to see us because we're creating jobs, we're creating stability down there. So I was like, why would they? Well, that's why, because the U.S. wants places that are going to have stability. Part of that stability is the farming communities, which is who we work with. So,
Greg, will you be able to stick around a little bit for other questions, because time-wise? Okay, great, okay.
Yep, good.
All right,
Thank you.
hey, Greg.
Thank you very much, Greg. And I didn't write back, but Teddy, who is logging in from Antigua, said that he is running out of coffee and he'll trade you coffee for rum if that is something you are interested in. I believe that for sure. I will also do like a separate side deal, Teddy. We don't need to involve Greg. That's it. Everything is wonderful. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you guys next week.